Hello everyone, welcome to Family Tree DNA webinars. My name is Elise Friedman. I am the webinar coordinator for Family Tree DNA. Today's webinar is Family Tree DNA Results Explained, Why DNA Markers, Matches, and Genealogy. This presentation today we will be talking about the markers that you receive back when you do a Y-DNA test and how to use those for genealogy purposes. Before we get started with the main part of the webinar, I have a couple of quick housekeeping items to go through. First of all, technical support. If you have any issues with this webinar, the best way to get assistance with that is to contact the Citrix or GoToWebinar technical support team. They run the webinar software that we're using for today's webinar. You guys should be seeing my screen right now, and if you are, then you should be seeing some phone numbers on the screen and a website. So the website is support.gotowebinar.com, and in the U.S. the toll-free number is 800-263-6317. There are some other phone numbers currently on the screen which are also available on the screen or on when you go to support.gotowebinar.com. I did just have a question. Somebody said that their webinar software did not come up in English, and that's actually something that I haven't seen before. You can try going to the view option or the options menu at the top of your screen. I'm actually not sure, even preferences, where that language is. Oh, actually, no, I see it. At least at the top of a Windows PC interface, there's a little globe at the top of the control panel, and there's different languages there. By default, it should have gone to English. But if for anybody it came up in a different language, I would see if you can find that little globe icon at the top. If for some reason it's not switching to English for you, then it may be beneficial to log off the webinar and log back on. So sorry about that. Let's see. So the next thing is actually to show you the control panel. So when you log onto the webinar, those of you on a Windows PC should be seeing a control panel in front of you. Those of you on a Mac computer will see a slightly different control panel, but should have similar functionality. So you should be seeing this control panel here. If you want to minimize the control panel and move it out of your way, then go ahead and click on this orange and white button on the left-hand side, and that will minimize your control panel for you into a little mini panel. And if you want to reopen that, just click on that same button again, and that will reopen it for you. There's a view menu. You can choose to view the webinar in either full screen or window mode and choose to auto-hide the control panel if you wish. And audio mode, by default, everybody's logged into the webinar using your computer's audio. That means your computer speakers and a microphone if we were using that, but you guys will not be using your microphone. Everybody's muted on this webinar except for me. I'm the only voice that you should be hearing. If you prefer, you may use your phone for the audio, and to do that you can go ahead and click on Use Telephone, and that will then provide you with a dial-in phone number and an access code for this webinar. Please be aware these are not toll-free dial-in numbers. They are by default US-based toll numbers, long-distance numbers. And since you cannot speak to me during the webinar, the way that you'll communicate with me is by using the questions panel. And to do that, you will click on click down here. You can type your questions at any time during the presentation. And then what I'll do is I answer questions throughout the presentation. If you're asking a question, basically asking for clarification or something that I'm currently discussing, or I may hold your question until later in the presentation or at the end of the presentation. A couple of people just told me that they're not seeing the screen, so let me go ahead and try to reset that. Let's see. Okay, I think you guys should be seeing my screen now, so please let me know if you're still not. And here's the questions panel that I was just talking about, and like I said, at the very end of the presentation I will be doing a final Q&A, and then within 24 hours after this presentation ends, you will, everybody attending live will receive a follow-up email that contains a link to the recording of today's webinar. So, with that, let us go ahead and move forward here. All right, so for today's presentation, as I said, we will be talking about the Y chromosome. There are 3 core tests that Family Tree DNA offers: the Y chromosome test, the mitochondrial or mtDNA test, and then the Family Finder test, which is autosomal and actually the X chromosome. But today we're going to focus on the Y chromosome. And on the Y chromosome, we're looking at the direct paternal line, the father's 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 father, etc. We typically, most people use this test to do surname studies. If you're Smith and you want to know if you're related to another Smith family or which other Smith family you're related to, that's typically what people use the Y chromosome test for. Or certainly, even if you aren't specifically trying to connect with another family of the same surname, just to find out who you connect to on the direct paternal line. And only men can do the Y DNA test. Only men biologically have a Y chromosome. Women do not have a Y chromosome. So only men can do the test, and women can have their male relatives do the Y-DNA test. So here's what we're going to cover in today's presentation. We are going to cover the basic highlights of Y-DNA. I just mentioned a couple of them, but I'll go into it a little more. We'll do a review of DNA basics. Hopefully those of you attending today have already attended the Introduction to Genetic Genealogy webinar. It gives you a good idea of the basics for each of the different types of tests that Family Tree DNA offers, but I'll do a quick review in case there are those of you attending today who have not attended that one. And then we'll take a look at the My FTDNA page and see where you will find your Y-DNA results on that page. And then we will go into several of the Y-DNA results pages. We're going to take a look at our matches. We're going to take a look at the YSTR values. That's the actual lab results. We will take a look at the Ancestral Origins page, and we'll also look at the Matches Maps page. And then we will have some final announcements and our final Q&A. So this presentation should take approximately an hour, give or take, from here. So highlights of the Y-DNA test. So as I just mentioned, surname studies. That's certainly one of the most common use of Y-DNA testing, regardless of whether you have a common name or an uncommon name. I got started with this because I was working on my grandmother's family, in which the name was Palevsky. And it was an uncommon surname, and most people with the Palevsky surname trace back to the same town in present-day Belarus, and I could not find the paper trail. So between between searching for the paper trail, I decided to contact some of these different families to find out if they'd be willing to participate in a Palevsky DNA study to find out which of the Palevsky lines were indeed related to each other. Just because it was a rare name didn't necessarily mean that they all shared a common patriarch. There could have been other reasons for the same rare surname being used by multiple families. So that's the most common reason people go ahead and do this Y-DNA test. Some people just don't know their paternity and don't know their biological father's direct paternal line. And so they might want to go ahead and do this test even though, maybe they're looking for a surname and not specifically looking to match their own surname. Certainly there are going to be some cases where people don't match on the direct paternal line their own surname. And so one of those, I just mentioned, which is somebody who doesn't know their paternal line. Maybe they were adopted or they just, for whatever reason, don't know who their father is. But there's other reasons besides that. There are some populations that have had surnames only relatively recently, that are surnames that were passed down from generation to generation. For example, Scandinavian populations used a patronymic until relatively recently. And so the patronymic was basically using the father's name as your last name. So Bob Jacobson was Bob, son of Jacob. And then Jacob Johnson was Jacob, son of John. And so, when you have that kind of ancestry and you had those kinds of surnames and you do a Y-DNA test, you're not necessarily going to find people with your same surname, because the Y-DNA test is going to go back further than some of those very recent names that have been handed down from generation to generation. In Scandinavian populations, I understand maybe the past 100 years, maybe a little more than that, maybe 200 years, is when they stopped using patronymics like that and actually had the same surname getting passed down from father to son to son to son to son. Same thing with Eastern European Jewish population, Ashkenazi Jewish population. Also, they used patronymics. It may have been Yehuda ben Shlomo, and that was Yehuda, son of Shlomo. And so, and same idea, you know, the surnames getting passed down from continually getting passed down father to son has been within the past 200 or 300 years. And the Y-DNA matches can go back further than that. Then, of course, we have people who deliberately changed their surname. Maybe somebody, for whatever reason, took their mother's maiden name instead of taking their father's name. Well, their Y chromosome, the biology of the Y DNA, still comes from the father, but in this case, the name came from the mother. So their Y DNA is not going to match people with their mother's maiden name. And then, you know, as I said, people who, you know, don't know their paternity, or, you know, there may be somewhere along the way where, you know, somebody's father wasn't who somebody thought it was. You know, it may not be in a recent generation. It could have been generations ago on your paternal line. You know, so there are a whole bunch, and there may be even more reasons as well, but there's a lot of different reasons why people may share a Y paternal, a Y DNA line, a paternal line, and yet have even the highest level matches being different surnames. So now, besides the genealogical portion of this, we also have a Y-DNA haplogroup, which tells us about our geographic and deep ancestral origins and the migrations over time of our direct paternal line. And we're actually not going to cover that today. We're going to cover that in the next presentation, which will be next week. So if you're interested in the haplogroup information and the deep ancestry, make sure you sign up for next week's presentation, which I'll mention at the end of today's presentation. And then, so for the number of markers that we test, we have 5 different marker levels that Family Tree DNA offers, and they are 12 markers, 25, 37, 67, and 111, and I'll go into details about why you might want to test one marker level over another, or if you've already tested, why you might, you know, want to think about testing more markers. But in general, the more markers, it gives you better precision and confidence in the age of your matches, basically. And when I say age, I mean as far as age of when the common ancestor was, how far back the common ancestor was. So we'll talk in more detail about that as we move forward. So as a reminder, what is the Y chromosome? Well, we all have 23 pairs of chromosomes in each of our cells. The first 22 pairs of our chromosomes are known as the autosomal chromosomes, and those are the chromosomes that are actually tested in our Family Finder test. The Y chromosome is part of the 23rd pair of chromosomes. The 23rd pair is the X and the Y. A male gets a Y chromosome from his dad, and his X chromosome from his mom. All of our chromosomes are in pairs because we always get one from mom, one from dad. So a male gets a Y from dad, an X from mom, whereas a female gets 2 X's. So as I said, a female can't be tested for the Y chromosome because biologically she doesn't have a Y chromosome. She gets 2 X's, one from mom, one from dad. So the Y chromosome only men have, and the Y chromosome is what makes a male a male. The X and the Y chromosomes are called the sex chromosomes. So they determine if somebody has a Y chromosome, that's what determines that they're going to be male. So the Y chromosome is passed down from father to son only. Only men have it, women don't have it, so women can't pass it down to their children, women can't inherit it, it can't jump over a woman. It goes directly through the paternal line. So basically, if we're looking at this basic ancestor chart here, and we have a brother and a sister at the bottom, and then we have their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-greats, etc., and if we remove everybody in the middle of that chart, and actually really could remove everybody on the right-hand side here as well, that paternal line is just going to be the left-hand side of our ancestor chart, assuming that we have the men on the left and the women on the right, which tends to be how people end up drawing their ancestor charts. And so we have the male down here. He inherited his Y chromosome from his dad, who inherited it from his dad, who inherited it from his dad, who inherited it from his dad. Now, of course, a male passes down his Y chromosome to all of his male children. So if the grandfather here had another male child, so then you've got the father and let's say a brother, his brother over here, who would be the uncle of this person down here, he has the same Y chromosome. He passes it down to his own son. So basically all direct paternal line or male line descendants of a particular ancestor will have that same chromosome that got passed down from son to son to son to son to son. Okay? So, now, what is our DNA? What is the Y chromosome? What is all this? Well, all of our chromosomes and even our mitochondria are made up of 4 building blocks or bases, or nucleotides is another word for that. And those bases are known as adenine, cytosine, thymine, and guanine. And if you just remember the A, C, G, and T, the 4 letters that they start with, that's really all you need to take away from here, at least to get started. And so those bases make up the this is basically like a twisted ladder, is each of our chromosomes, and those bases make up the steps of the ladder. And this is what the DNA test is testing us for, these A, C's, G's, and T's. And so the sequence or the order of those bases in our Y chromosome is the DNA sequence of our Y chromosome and all of our chromosomes. So keep that in mind for a few minutes. That was a brief intro or reminder about what the Y chromosome is and what it is that we're actually looking at when we're doing genetic genealogy. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go and show you now where you would actually find your results on your MyFTDNA pages. And then we're going to go into how do we now use this testing for genealogy, what kind of results do you get back from family tree DNA, and what do you do with it. So on your MyFTDNA page, when you log in, your page should look something like this. You have your name up in the top corner here along with your kit number. That's your user ID at Family Tree DNA. That's how you logged into your accounts. And at the very top of the screen here, we have a blue menu bar. And well, with an orange button on the right-hand side here, but essentially it's a blue menu bar. This is your main menu. This is where you're going to access all of your results from. Now, while you're on the home page, there are some other links here as well. You'll see a YDNA section with different links underneath. These are the same links that you'll find under the YDNA section in the blue menu bar. But these are going to be visible only when you're on the home page, the page that you get to when you first log into your account. But once you're on any other page of your account, you don't always need to come back to your home page to access these links. That's where that blue menu bar is going to come in handy. You can always go up to the blue menu bar no matter what page you're on and be able to switch to a different page of your results. Of course, if you'd like to come back to the home page, you can always click on Home here and come back to this. So when you hover your mouse over the YDNA page here, the YDNA menu, you'll have a menu that comes down. Because this is just a static screenshot, I don't have that on my screen, but you'll have a menu that opens up, and it will look something like this. And you'll see here that you have about 10 or so different links. And the very first one that we're going to go ahead and take a look at is matches. When you first get your results back from Family Tree DNA, you will receive an email saying that your results have been posted to your account. Now with the YDNA test, because it's actually tested in different segments or different panels, you may get back a little bit of your results at a time. So you may get back, if you order a 37 marker test, you may get back the first 12 markers. And then a few days later, you may get back, say, markers 13 through 25, and then you may get back markers 26 through 37. And it's because each panel is actually a separate test panel within the lab. And sometimes they might all come in one day. That may happen as well. But don't be surprised if you get back some of your results before you get back the whole thing. That's normal. It's fairly common. It just depends on where that part of your test was in process in the lab. There may also be some cases where you might actually get back later markers before the earlier markers. So you might get back markers 26 through 37 before you get 1 through 12. And in that case, then you actually have to wait for 1 through 12 to come in before you can really do much with it. So just a heads up for anybody who might still be waiting for results back. So, so you get notification that your results are back and you log into your account. where do you go to first? I personally recommend going to the matches page first. You know, certainly look around your home page and everything. You'll actually see your haplogroup on your home page, which again we'll discuss next week. But you know, besides that, you know, most people want to know, who am I related to? Who do I match in the family tree DNA database? And so you can go ahead and go to your matches page. And then you will see a page that looks something like this. So this is my brother's Y-DNA matches page, or an excerpt from it. He has a ton of matches, so I can't show you the whole thing. I have tested him for 67 markers, and I will explain what we are seeing here on the screen. So first of all, at the very top of the page, we have a filter section. This is going to let us change our view of the matches page, and I'll actually talk about this later on. Let me talk about the other part of it first. Then the main section of the page here is regarding, these are your actual matches in the database. So we have several columns of information. Almost all of them have a header, have a name to the column. So the very first column is the steps column, although actually I think that's been changed now. I need to do a new screenshot. I believe yours says genetic distance. And steps and genetic distance are the same thing. It's just different terminology as used for it, but I believe it says genetic distance now. So this doesn't, some people get confused and think this tells you how many generations back the person is related. That's not it. Genetic distance tells you how many differences you have on your results from the other person. So let's say you did a 67 marker test like my brother has here. And let's say somebody matches him on 66 out of his 67 markers. So they have one difference. That's going to be a genetic distance of 1, or 1 step. If somebody has 2 differences, that will then be considered a genetic distance of 2, or 2 steps. So let's say they match on 65 out, 65 out of the 67 markers. So that is what you'll see on the left, in the leftmost column here. The next column is the name column. These are the names of your matches. You are getting names of other customers in the Family Tree DNA database who did the Y-DNA test, just like you. Okay? And so you'll get their names. I do have their names blanked out a little bit here for privacy. So that's why you only see some partial names here. You see some last names. For the purpose of this webinar, I have blanked out those names, but you should be seeing names on your screens. You will see that the names are underlined. You can click on each of those names, and that will actually pop up a little miniature profile about the person, and what they chose to include in their profile will be what you will see there. One of the things you'll see, of course, is their name. You will see their email address. You might see a list of what projects they're participating in if they chose to make that available to their matches. You might see their haplogroup information. You could also see the name of their most distant known ancestor, which is actually the same as this column here. And you might even see a list of all of their known ancestral surnames. And the reason for that is because for people who do the Family Finder test, the autosomal test, it's actually important to list all of your surnames. So, and you might see maternal information as well, because their profile shows all of it, not just the Y-DNA information. So that's a great place to go to get your match's email address, and then you can contact your match if you want to discuss your match with them and discuss your genealogy with them. You may also see your match's photos. There is an option here to see photos if somebody's uploaded their photo. Now, after the names, we have a section that includes a bunch of different icons and some notations, and I'll explain these. So the very first icon looks like a little envelope and paper. That also is the email address. So if you click on this icon, what this will do is it's actually a web-based hyperlink to the email address. It's called a mail to. And so if you click on that, it's going to try to open your email program and basically start addressing an email to that person. So just a heads up, if you don't use an email program on your computer and you don't have your computer configured to know that it should open up Gmail or some other web-based email program, then it may give you an error message saying that, you don't have Microsoft Outlook set up or something like that. I've had people say that. And that's because your computer doesn't recognize what program you're using to do your email. So for some people, it may be easier to go to the profile and copy and paste the email address and then just go ahead and start your own email and put it in the email. The next icon is the tip icon. TIP stands for Time Predictor. It's the Family Tree DNA Time Predictor. If you click on this, it will give you an estimate of how far back the common ancestor may be between you and that match. And the tip, the algorithm that is basically the calculations that are used for the tip calculator are specific to Family Tree DNA. It's a proprietary calculation that they do. What we do for that is we take into account how many markers are tested, which markers you match on, how many markers you mismatch on, and which markers you mismatch on, because some markers actually have a different, some tend to mutate more frequently than others, and so the calculation takes some of that into account. So you may actually get some slightly different time frames for two different people who both have the same genetic distance from you, and it could be because they mismatch you on two different markers that have some differences in the frequency of that particular marker potentially mutating. So that's something neat that you could look at. In a little while in this presentation, I'm actually going to give you some average time frames for different marker levels and differences. But if you specifically want to know between you and a specific match that you have on this screen, use that tip icon and you can take a look at that. Okay, the next icon is a little pencil and paper. This is a notes icon. This is where you can actually record private notes for yourself about each of the matches. So let's say you just want to put a reminder in there saying, oh, I sent an email to this person on March 13th, 2014. You can go ahead and click that notes icon and type that note in and save it. Only you see it, or whoever has access to your account, if you have other people with access to your account. Your match doesn't see it. You're not sending a note to your match. It's a private note for yourself. Okay? Another thing that might be useful to use is, let's say you send an email to a match and somebody, they email you back and they give you a bunch of great information and you don't want it to get lost in your email, or let's say you just like to keep your email clear, or let's say you have so much email that things get lost. You might want to take some of that information and either copy and paste or summarize it in the notes field right next to your match's name. And that also will, then indicate to you that, hey, I've already either contacted this match or tried to, or there's some kind of note that I put here about them. Once you put a note in here, this icon should turn green. I think you have to, the next time you go to the page, you'll see it's green. It doesn't turn green the minute that you save. I think you have to refresh the page. But it should be green again next time you go to the page. And so that will help indicate that, oh, I stored a note for this person. Then the next icon that you'll see not everybody has is a blue little pedigree chart. This tells you that your match has uploaded their family tree to their account, and you can click on that blue icon to view their family tree. Currently, the Family Tree DNA system, it's going to show you their the person's ancestor tree only. So it starts from the person who tested and has their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc. Doesn't have any cousins, descendants, aunts and uncles or whatnot. It's only direct line ancestors. So you can take a look through there. And the final thing that you'll see here is a notation. YDNA 67, it could say YDNA 12, 25, 37, 67, or 111. That tells you what level of tests, the highest level of tests that that person has taken. So it doesn't necessarily say that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you match them at that level. What tells you that you match at that level is at a certain level is the fact that they're listed on your matches page. What this tells you is that they have tested up to a certain level. So, you might match some people at a lower level, and not match them at a higher level. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So then we have the next column is the most distant known ancestor. This is information that your match has to enter themselves in their account, and if you haven't entered this in your own account yet, you should do so, and you can actually find that under the My Account and most ancestors or most distant ancestors menu under the My Account option within your MyFTDNA account. And so this is supposed to tell you what's the most distant known direct paternal line ancestor they can trace back to. If they can trace back to their third great-grandfather on the direct paternal line and they don't know the name of their fourth great-grandfather, then their third great-grandfather is their most distant ancestor. And that's the name that should be in here. So in some cases, you're going to see names that you do recognize as a most distant ancestor. That's the best case scenario, that you say, hey, I have that person in my family tree, or hey, I trace back to that person as well. Or you might even say, oh, I trace back to that person and I even know his father. You know, so that's the best case scenario. Of course, then you're going to have situations where you might not recognize the name on the tree. And what that could indicate a few different things. Number one, could indicate that the other person, that your match, doesn't have their tree far back enough yet for you to recognize the common ancestor between you and your match. Or it could mean they're further back than you are and you don't have your tree far back enough to recognize the common ancestor, you know, the most distant ancestor as the common ancestor between you. So, you know, you never know which way it is until you look at the trees and potentially even contact them. And that's, of course, if you have the same surname. Now, what happens when you have matches with different surnames, which is something that John had just asked a question on? Well, you'll see that this is the case with my brother. And so my brother's last name is the same as mine. It's Friedman. And you'll see that he has matches with surnames Hodis and Ferguson and Goldstein and Solish. This is Fields and a few other ones. He's got a Lipman. Well, this is because our background is Ashkenazi Jewish, which, as I mentioned before, our surnames are fairly young. They've only been around for the past 100 or 200 years. Or 300 years even, potentially. And as a matter of fact, my last name, Friedman, actually has only been around for a little over 100 years because my family adopted the name Friedman when they came to the United States. Before that, they had a Polish-sounding name, Kimiotic. And why they took the name Friedman, I still don't know yet, but I have proof that they did. So I wasn't expecting to match any Friedmans, and which is funny enough because, as it turns out, it's not on this page, but my brother does actually have a Friedman match. But Friedman is such a common name that's like, you know, I don't know of the connection. You know, I've checked it out. I can't find a connection between my family and this other Friedman, and they also could have had a name change from something else to Friedman. So the fact that we have all these other different surnames as matches, then, you know, that certainly will make it a challenge to be able to connect with those other people because, I mean, at least as far back as I know, our paternal line name is Kimiotic. And so I don't have any connection that I know of with Hodis, Ferguson, Goldstein, etc. So what does that mean for me? Well, it means that this is a challenge, and it means that, you know, these people, I am related to them. There's no doubt. We match on 67 markers. That's a great match. But the connection is before my family adopted their surname, unless there was another surname change that I'm not aware of yet. So in cases like this, you really need to try to focus on, you know, it helps to focus on same surname matches when you're in a situation like this where basically everybody on your matches page has a different surname. Now, what if you have a situation where everybody on your matches page, they all have the same surname as each other, but it's different from your surname? What does that mean? Well, more than likely, that means that biologically, you're from the family of the other surname, and something happened somewhere in your ancestry to cause your branch to have a different surname. And it could be, like I said earlier, any variety of reasons. It could be somebody took a mother's maiden name. It could be somebody was adopted and took the adoptive father's name. You know, it certainly, yes, could be somebody's paternity not being what they thought it was. That is certainly a possibility, but I just want you to understand it's not the only possibility. So, there are a few, different reasons why that might happen before. So if you're in that situation where all of your matches have the same surname, but it's different from yours, then you're going to want to check into how you connect to that other family. And, this does happen to people periodically. This is not unheard of. And so the best thing to do in those cases, is to contact the family with that other surname. Maybe try to see if there's a surname project at Family Tree DNA for that particular surname, and contact the project administrator as well and see, if they have any further insight into just in general the genealogy of that family. But really what you're going to need to look for in that case is a common time and place. Look for a place where your family basically interacted or lived near or somehow crossed the path of a family with that other surname. And so, and you may have to, kind of work in collaboration with those other people to help try to narrow it down and figure it out. The other thing in that particular case that you may want to do is sometimes it helps to try to narrow down which generation the break happened in. And in that case, you may want to go out and recruit other relatives who are known in your paper trail to also do the Y-DNA test. And you can do it systematically. You can go out and say, okay, let me test my first cousin and make sure my first cousin matches me and that this is not a recent situation. And then as long as your first cousin matches, okay, go test a second cousin from that same paternal line. And, see if the second cousin matches. And if so, then at least you know that you're good up to your great-grandparents, because you and your second cousin share great-grandparents. Then go to third cousin, fourth cousin, fifth cousin. If you want, you could go out to the furthest first and then work your way in. Whatever ends up, whatever is easiest for you, and especially because when you have to recruit relatives, sometimes you can't necessarily recruit them systematically to do the testing. Sometimes you have to beg people to test. But that's what I would do, is kind of systematically, either from the most recent to the furthest out or from the furthest out in, and to try to at least confirm what you already know about your paper trail. It may be that the paper trail that you have is good as far out as you have it, but then somewhere further back than your paper trail is where the break was, and maybe that's why you can't get further back on your paper trail. So, so there's a lot of different scenarios there. So I think I covered the three main scenarios. Basically, if you match people with your own surname, that's what most people are looking for and hoping for, and, that's going to be best case scenario, and, okay, we match same surname, now let's figure out exactly who that common ancestor is. And then we have the case where you match a huge variety of surnames, and in that case, that's probably indicating that the surnames go back, or the Y-DNA match goes back before surnames were adopted, or inherited surnames were adopted. And then this last case I just talked about, when basically everybody else on your page has the same surname except for you. And in that case, you want to see how you connect to that other surname. You more than likely do. So anyway, so that hopefully that gives you an idea of how to look at this. The next columns are the haplogroup information, which again we're going to cover next week. And then the last column here is the match date. This tells you when that person actually first became a match to you at this level, at this match level in the Family Tree DNA database. So any of these headers that are underlined, you can click on to sort by that. So if you want to, by default, when you log on to this page, it will be sorted by genetic distance first, and then it will be sorted by date within genetic distance. But if you want to sort solely by date, let's say you're looking for your most recent matches regardless of what the genetic distance is, you can click on the match date header, and it will then sort by date. I believe when you click on it the first time, it will actually sort from earliest to latest, so you'll get your earliest matches first. But then if you click on that a second time, it'll reverse the sort so that your most recent matches are at the top of the list. So you can do that as well. Okay, the other thing to be aware of when you first come to your matches page is that you'll be shown matches for the highest level that you've tested and have results for back. So let's just assume that you have all of your results back. My brother has tested 67 markers. He has all of his results back. So when I first go to this page, it automatically shows me my 67 marker matches. But I also am still being compared to people at the lower levels because all of these different marker levels are cumulative. They're additive, basically. So for somebody who has done only a 12-marker test, it's the same 12 markers as that I was tested for and my brother was tested for as his first 12 markers. So I can go backwards and look at the lower level matches as well. So to do that, now we're going to go up to the filter section, and you'll see here there's a markers menu, and it gives you options up to the marker level you've tested. So I can click on 37 and then go over here and click on the orange Run Report button, and that will refresh the match list to show me the people who I match at 37 markers. Some of those people are certainly going to be the same people on my 67 marker match list, because obviously if people match me at 67 markers, that means they've also tested at least 37, and so they should show up on my match list. But I may have additional matches at the 37 marker level who are not on my 67 marker match list, because they may not have upgraded or tested as far as 67 markers. They may have only tested 37. So that's a really important to keep in mind, is don't only look at your highest level matches, but it may be helpful to look at your lower level matches as well. And I will give a caveat to that when I talk about time frames for these matches in just a little while. If you have a ton of 67 marker matches, you're going to have even more 12 marker matches, and some of those 12 marker matches are going to be completely insignificant. Some of them will just be coincidental, and that they don't mean anything at the higher marker levels. They may not match you at the higher marker levels. And that's why we do go up to the higher marker levels, is sort of to refine that and say, okay, who are my closest matches? But I just want you guys to, at least think about this, especially when you have over 37 markers, to at least go down to the 37 marker level, just because, not everybody tests the same marker level. So that's one way that you can filter your matches. You can look at different levels. If you want to, you can actually select a specific genetic distance to look at. So let's say you wanted to see only your exact matches. Then you could go to distance, and by default all is selected, but you can click on this and select 0 if you want, and then run report, and that will show you only your exact matches. 0 genetic distance means an exact match, no differences. But I think most people probably leave this on all, I would guess. And then show matches for. By default, as long as your settings, your personal settings are set this way on your My Account page, by default you're compared with the entire family tree DNA database. So you can, if you want, just compare your results to people in a specific project that you've joined. So I could click on this menu, and then I get different options. One of them is I do have my brother in the Friedman project, even though I know that the Friedman name doesn't go back more than 100 years for my family, but I might still connect with people who became, who also are from my family, who are Friedmans from the past 100 years. There are actually some distant cousins out there who I haven't been able to locate, because Friedman's such a common name. And so one of these days they might actually do a DNA test and show up in the Friedman project. So I can actually go ahead and select the Friedman project from here and run report, and then it'll limit my list to only show me the matches within the Friedman project. I also have my brother in a haplogroup study and in a geographical project. So you might have reasons why you might want to temporarily filter your list to only look at your matches within specific projects. Probably, especially if you're actually looking at the 12 marker level, the broadest level, and you say, okay, well, I want to see 12 marker matches. I have too many when I look at the whole database, but let's see which ones of those are in my project. You can do that as well, and that might, then hopefully filter that huge list down to only people who actually share your surname. So that's, another thing you can do. So you can play around with these, and these filters are all temporary. These are just basically you can filter the page as you're using it, but then when you log out of your account and log back into your account, it's going to go back to the default again. Or even if you go off the page and come back to the page, it'll go to the default again. So let's see. I had a couple of quick questions on while I'm on the matches page before I move on. Don asked why my brother attested only to the 67 marker level. That's just what I chose to do. I haven't upgraded him to 111 markers yet. He actually has a really good set of matches at 67, and really upgrading him to 111 in my particular case is probably not going to be, all that useful to me. It's really just going to probably give me the same matches, or at least those who have tested to 111 already, which at least when I took this screenshot, only one person on the first page had. And it's probably just going to give me, what do you call it? Just, kind of a more precise time frame maybe if I go to 111, but, I just haven't decided if I want to do that yet. Some people do want that. So, sometimes it's just a matter of what you want to spend. And so, sometimes somebody might look at something and say, I could do that, but it might be overkill. There's not really a good reason to do it at this time. So it's totally up to you. Some people swear by the 111 markers. Other people swear by 37 markers. So it's really, up to each individual situation. Okay, let's see what other questions I had here. Dave asked, is there any way to contact a person who shows up only as a surname in the match list and has no other clickable icons? So there are some people who you are going to see in that situation, and on my screen here, you actually see I have a couple of people with private listed. That private notation has actually been removed from the accounts, but it's blank now instead, and you might just see I have it blanked out here, but in this particular case for this guy and this guy listed private, I only see the surname. Those are people who, for one reason or another, have chosen not to be compared either at a particular marker level, or they may have chosen only to be compared within the projects that they're participating in. They may have chosen not to be compared with the whole database. And so, and everybody has specific reasons why they might have chosen to do that. And so just so you're aware, what that means is that they're not seeing your information either. So, if somebody is set to not be able to see their matches at, say, the 25 marker level, or not to be displayed at 25 markers, they can't see you either. So it is reciprocal, so it's not, just so you understand, they're not hiding from you while still being able to see your information. So, we really try to do that fairly, so that if somebody, for whatever reason, does want to limit their matching, that they can't, hide themselves and still be able to see other people who are not hidden. So unfortunately, there is no way to get their contact information if they have chosen to set themselves that way, or at least no direct way to do it. If you have their surname, you certainly could see if there's a surname project and contact the project administrator and see if they can try to facilitate contact between you and the person. That's a possibility. But other than that, there really is no way to do that, and that's because it's how they did their settings. You can't even contact customer support and have customer support do it, because by policy, customer support won't give out the information for people who have set themselves that way. So let's see. Okay. All right, I think I'm going to hold the rest of those questions until a little bit later, just because some of these are pretty lengthy questions. It'll take me a while to read through and think about. So bear with me, and I'll go ahead and go back to some of those a little bit later. All right, so I think that basically gives you, a good idea of this page. The one other thing I want to point out to you, actually, with regards to why this notation is actually provided for how many markers somebody has tested. Let's say you've tested, 37 or 67 markers or 111, and let's say you decide to go and look at your 25 marker match page, and you see somebody on your 25 marker match page or 25 marker match list, and somebody with the same last name as you, but that person was not on your 37 or 67 marker matches. Why would that happen? Well, it could be for one of two reasons. Either they didn't test the higher level markers, or they did and the match fell apart. And basically, even though they might have the same surname as you, they could be, irrelevant, especially when you're dealing with a common surname like Smith. You could end up with, Smith matches who have nothing to do with you at the lower marker levels. It could just be very broad, distant level, very broad matches that are not genealogically relevant. So that's why this notation is provided. So then you go and look at the notation next to that person's name, and you see, oh, they only have YDNA 25 listed. So that means they've only tested 25 markers, so they can't match you at the higher level. So that's when you could contact that person and, kindly, certainly introduce yourself and everything, but then basically, say, hey, I've tested 37 or 67 markers. I see we have the same surname, and we do match at 25 markers. It would be really interesting to compare ourselves at 37 or 67 as well. You might, would you consider upgrading? So sometimes there's a nice way to sort of suggest that to your matches, but if we weren't providing this notation here telling you how many markers they've tested, then you might look at that and just assume that, well, they don't match me at the higher marker level, so they're not relevant, when it could be, in actuality, a very good match who just has done a lower level test. So that's, definitely pay attention to that information as well. Oh, and I did have one question here. Somebody asked, what is the report that is run off this page? So this run report option, what this is just refreshing the same page if you filter your information up here. So I showed you if you were to go and change markers to, say, 37 or 25, to get the page to refresh, to show you those lower level, those other matches, you need to click run report. And that will just refresh the information on the page for you. It'll pull the new information from the database and display it to you. Okay, so last thing on this page about your matches themselves, hopefully I gave you a really good idea of how to understand these matches, depending on whether they have the same surname or different surnames, etc. A suggestion for contacting your matches, because I hear from a lot of people, who say, I email my matches and I don't hear back from them. And that, of course, could happen for a huge variety of reasons. Not everybody is, prompt at responding to email. Not everybody, is tech savvy. Some people may have done the test and they just really don't know enough about it, or maybe they haven't attended my webinars or, attended, other education to learn what to do with their results. So they might get an email and just think, I don't know what to do with this. And somebody might be on vacation, somebody might be ill, somebody may have changed an email address and forgot to change it in their account. So, there's a lot of different reasons why you might not get a response back, not having anything to do with you. But there also is, I have received some match emails from people that I've looked at and said, that they really could have sent a better email. And so let me give you an example here. I have, I think in the past, received an email that basically said, hi, we're a match at Family Tree DNA. Can you contact me? With no other information, sometimes without signing their name. I don't know who they are. I don't know who the match is. Not everybody who tests actually tested themselves. Sometimes people test, other family members. I've tested my brother. So when my brother tests, or somebody tries to contact my brother, they're actually contacting me. It's my email address. And so and I actually have my email address on multiple accounts, and so sometimes people contact me and I don't know who they're contacting me about. I don't know which of my matches they're contacting me about. And then sometimes I get emails from people that are so wordy and basically talk about their entire family history and tell me about every single line of their ancestry that, it's just too much for me to read and to pick out the important parts of it. When you're doing a Y-DNA test, you're only looking at the direct paternal line. And so your mother's side of the family, totally irrelevant. And, even your dad's mother's family, may be totally irrelevant. So, really the direct paternal line is what's most relevant. And so my recommendation when you send an email to your matches is, number one, please introduce yourself and please address the person who you're sending the email to. So, if somebody actually sent the email to me and said, dear Brett, or dear Brett, or whoever's managing, their account, that's something where, at least I know who they're emailing. And then if they, introduce themselves to me, tell me what they're mailing about, we match on 67 markers on Y-DNA. This is the person that, I tested myself or I tested my relative, and this is the name of the person. This is what I know about my direct paternal line. Can you please, and then they, can you please tell me about yours? And that way you're giving them information that's specific to the match and also asking for a response. And sometimes I'll put in the email as well, please let me know about yours as well, even if you don't recognize any information in my family, because, especially as we continue to do research, we may come up with something. Like, I'm still researching my family. So I may actually find something a month from now that might connect into the other person's family, but if they didn't respond with their information, then I don't necessarily, then I don't have that information, and it's not going to click with me. So, and then sign your name. So please sign your name. Don't just assume your name is going to come with the email that you send. And so, anyway, so that's just my personal recommendation. So you really have to think about it. Try to think about the amount of time that you're asking the other person to actually spend on that email, and the amount of information you're giving. Oh, and the other thing that sometimes I've had people do is basically just give me a link to their family tree and say, here's my family tree, go look at it. And unfortunately, I don't have time for that either. I'm so busy. I don't have time to wade through somebody else's tree without having some other introductory information first, and to kind of be given guidance, as to what I should be looking at. So those are just my personal recommendations. And like I said, some people, even if you write the greatest email, some people are just so busy that they might not respond, to email right away. And sometimes you have to, do have to have some patience. So anyway, that's just my suggestions. Can't guarantee it'll work all the time, but at least I can, give you some ideas for, how you might want to do this. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the bottom section here before we move on to the rest of this. First of all, download matches. You can actually download an Excel spreadsheet file or a CSV, which actually can be imported into any spreadsheet program or even any regular plain text editor, to download your list of matches to your computer, so you can store them on your computer if you want. And then at the very bottom, additional possibilities for searching matches. Family Tree DNA sponsors a public database called YSearch, and if you want, you can upload your results to YSearch. You'll get a separate account in YSearch, and that separate account, you'll then be able to upload your results. You'll get a separate user ID and password, and then you can compare yourself to people in YSearch. It has, some other flexible matching capabilities and things like that. One of the benefits of YSearch is that people who did a Y-DNA test with other companies, not Family Tree DNA, can create free accounts at YSearch if they choose. So you may be able to compare with people who tested with some other companies. And then certainly a lot of people in YSearch will also be from Family Tree DNA. And it's totally optional. So, if you want to do it, you'll have to click the button and start the upload process. If you upgrade your test later on, if you upload to YSearch your 37 markers and then you decide to upgrade to 67 later on, those will not automatically be uploaded to YSearch. You'll need to go back. You'll have a link down here similar to what I have that'll say, you have additional results. Would you like to, upload those to your YSearch account, or something to that effect. And then the fact that I've already uploaded my brother's results there, it gives me a link where I can go to YSearch from here to take a look at it. So again, totally optional, totally up to you. All right, so now, hopefully, I spend a lot of time on the matches page because I do think that that's really the most important page of this, so that you know what you're looking at when you are looking at your matches, and how to analyze them and how to understand them. But there are a few other pages of results that I want to quickly go through. So first of all, the standard YSTR results. It's the last option on your menu at the bottom. this is the actual lab results that you got by your DNA being tested at Family Tree DNA. So what this basically is showing you is the different panels. I mentioned the panels before. So and each of the panels are standard. So markers 1 through 12 are always tested together, and then 13 through 25, etc. And so the first line of each of these rows here is the name of the marker. And the name, most of them are DYS and then a number. Sometimes you might see DYF, or sometimes you might see something like YCA2, etc. There's different reasons for the different naming. That's not really important right now, but I can tell you DYS just means DNA Y chromosome segment. And then the numeric after that is just a numeric that was given to it. The first one of these markers that was basically discovered on the Y chromosome, or not the first one, but one of the early ones was named DYS 390. The next one discovered was named DYS 391. The next one discovered was named DYS 392. So there's no really rhyme or reason for the naming, as far as the name itself doesn't necessarily tell you anything about that particular marker. It's just what it was named. And what are markers? Well, markers are basically segments of the Y chromosome. So the marker name does identify a specific segment of the Y chromosome. And then the value underneath is what the lab was testing you for. Everybody's tested for the same marker. So everybody who was tested for the 12 marker test, they're all tested for the same 12 markers. So everybody has the markers. It's the value of the markers, which essentially is the length of the marker. That's kind of the quick and easy way to think about it, is that value is the length of the marker. And some people have different length markers. So they all have the markers, but then they have different lengths. And that's what's calculated. So at DYS 393, my brother has a 12. At DYS 390, my brother has a 23 there, etc. And it's these values that are then compared with other customers in the Family Tree DNA database. And then that's how the information was, that's how the matches were discovered, is by which markers were matched and what values were matched and compared. So actually I'll show you a specific example here. These markers are known as short tandem repeats. STRs, that's where the name and the title comes from, the standard Y STR results. And a short tandem repeat, well, short, we all know what short means. Tandem means next to each other. And repeat, we know what repeat means. So basically these are short segments, DNA segments with short repeating segments basically next to each other. So for example, GATC, 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 GATC. Something like this would be known as a marker or a short tandem repeat. And so just to give you, now every marker has its own sequence and whatnot, and that information is not provided at Family Tree DNA. There's actually a genetics database out there that I actually have an advanced webinar that goes into much more detail about this. But basically, I can show you one example. For DYS 393, the repeat structure at that one is AGAT. And so the fact that my brother has a 12 here means that AGAT was repeated 12 times in a row. Some people have it repeated only 11 times. Some people might have it repeated 13 times. So that's where that information comes from. So once you have that information, of course, that then goes, to, within Family Tree DNA, within the system, all of those calculations are done for you, and that's where your matches page comes from. And that's where it's determined how many, what your genetic distance is between you and somebody else, whether you have a difference at your marker value. So I'm going to show you some specific examples here so that you can see what it looks like if you were to actually compare this manually. So we have a 3-generation family here for this example. We have a grandfather, his 2 sons, and then son A, his 2 sons, or grandson little a and grandson big A. And then we have son B, who has 1 son, grandson B. Each of these people are listed down here at the bottom. There's this 6 males, and the results, these are their 25 marker results, and they're listed across the screen. And the top part here, these are just the marker names listed vertically. So this is DYS 393 in this first column, DYS 390, the values in the second column, etc. And so basically in this bottom section, everywhere where you see blue in a column, in a vertical column, those are matching values. So we've got, for DYS 393, all 6 men have a 12. DYS 390, all 6 of them have a 23. DYS 19, all 6 of them have a 14, etc. Basically, when the Y chromosome is passed down from father to son, the Y chromosome is essentially passed down intact. However, there could be some minor mutations that happen along the way. They do happen along the way, not in every generation, not even in every other generation necessarily. It's totally random. It depends. And basically, they're counting errors. So when the biological process happens that essentially copies the Y chromosome from father to son, well, there's an enzyme that goes through and copies all those A's, C's, G's, and T's. And with the repeats, sometimes it kind of loses count as it's copying those repeats. And so you may end up with a case where a son has one less repeat than the father, or even one more repeat than the father. And that's how mutations happen. And that's how differences happen on the Y chromosome. And so, as humans, we are essentially always kind of changing over time, and our DNA is always changing a little bit over time. And so, within recent generations, you're not going to expect drastic differences. You're certainly going to have drastic differences between father and son, but you could have a difference because it just could be that, roll the dice, it happened to be a mutation between you and your own son or you and your own father. And so this is what we're looking at here. So if we go over now to the 5th marker here, DYS 385A, there's a 15 here that the grandfather had. Son A up here also has the 15. And then grandson big A and grandson little a, they also have 15. So 15, 15, 15, 15. However, son B has 14. There was a mutation. So between grandfather and son B, this red spot here, that's indicating this mutation. There was a 14. There's nothing medically relevant about that mutation. There's nothing bad about it. It happens. And so now what happens when son B has a 14? What happens when he has a son? What does his son get? His son gets 14 also. Because son B, when he has a son, it's his Y chromosome that gets passed down to grandson B, to his own son. It no longer matters what the grandfather had. Son B's biology doesn't say anything about what the grandfather had. That's forgotten. That's in the past. So this 14 gets passed down to grandson B. Could there have been another mutation at that same marker? Sure. Could it have mutated back to 15? Theoretically, yes. In most cases, that wouldn't happen, but it is possible. Biologically, it's possible. Could it have mutated further down to 13? Sure. But who's to say that that marker would mutate versus some other marker on the Y chromosome? And it's certainly not every marker that mutates, in every generation. It might just be one marker that mutated between grandfather and son B out of all the markers they have on their Y chromosome. So, that's important to keep in mind. So usually between father and son, you wouldn't find more than one mutation. I think I have heard of and seen some cases, some rare cases where there were 2 mutations between father and son. In most cases, if there's any, there's going to be one. So, you can see we continue going here, and we've got all blue, but then we see some more orange here. We highlighted this one. So we now have grandfather son A and grandson big A with a 9, or sorry, with an 8 at this particular marker. It's 459B is that marker. But then grandson little a, he had a mutation. So, and again, the mutation happened between father and son. And he had that mutation here, and he ended up with 1 higher. He got a 9. So why did grandson A not get that mutation? And in the same token, for the first mutation here, when son B got this mutation, why didn't son A get it? Well, that's because every basically transmission event, every time the Y chromosome is copied from father to son, each separate, it's separate each time. It's not that the DNA mutated in the father, it's that the DNA mutated when it was being copied from father to son. So this was a totally separate event, and there was no mutation in that case. And so same thing here between son A and grandson little a, happened to be a mutation. Between son A and grandson big A, there wasn't. And then the rest of these markers, nothing mutated. So this is just an example. This actually happens to be a real example. This example was actually borrowed from Bennett Greenspan, who is the president and CEO of Family Tree DNA. There is a mutation between him and his father, but no mutation between his brother and his father. But then his brother, one of his sons who was tested, did have a separate mutation. So, and the other one didn't, et cetera. So this is actually a real example. And you can be sure, especially the fact that there was a mutation within the first 12 markers, you can be sure that when Bennett first started the company and first started doing this testing, they tested and tested and retested that to make sure it wasn't an error, and it's not. So this can be seen, in many different father-son pairs, over time. So somebody just asked, Carla just asked, can you use mutations between families to sort out how long ago a mutation happened anytime? That's a possibility. There are some families that actually do have mutations that, if you test enough people in a family, and we're not talking just immediate family, but, if you go out and test a whole bunch of fifth cousins all descended from the same common, sixth great-grandparent or fifth great-grandparent, whatever it is, then you may indeed end up actually finding a mutation that happened somewhere back in time that basically got passed down to all of that branch's descendants, but that didn't happen on another branch. So essentially creating what can be termed as a branch tag. It's not going to happen in all, it's not going to happen in all cases. It won't be obvious in all cases. Certainly you have to be careful with that, because there certainly could be times where there's just happens to be an unusual mutation that doesn't tag a specific branch. And you also, you have to test enough people to really say, okay, there's a pattern here. And that's something that every single surname project or whatever it is that you're working on, you all have to look at that individually for your own project, because it's going to be different for everybody. You may end up having a pretty distinctive, marker value for one branch on DYS 19, while some other surname may have a distinctive marker value on DYS 449. So that's just something that you really, especially your project administrators, or if you are a project administrator, that's something that you could be looking at. So hopefully this helps you. Oh, and the other thing on this page I want to show is just how to calculate genetic distance, how that's done. I pretty much explained that it's just the differences between, marker values, but I want to show you an example here, because this does tend to trip some people up. And I'm going to have you type in your responses to the questions panel here. So what is the genetic distance between grandfather and son A? Go ahead and type in your answers into the question panel. Between grandfather and son A. Okay, that's an easy one. Yes. 0. All right. That's correct. There were no differences between them. What is the genetic distance between grandfather and son B? Okay, got a lot of ones there. That is correct. The only difference between grandfather and son B was this mutation here at that 14 verse 15. What is the genetic distance between son B and grandson B? Son B and grandson B. Okay, I got a mix of responses there. I got zeros and ones. The correct answer for that is 0. Because son B and grandson B, remember that same mutation got passed down from father to son. So when you compare son B and grandson B, there's no differences between them. So they have the exact same values. It doesn't matter that the other people had that 15. They both have a 14 here. So they have a 0 genetic distance between them. Okay, what about, this one's going to be between son B or grandson B, either one because they're the same, and grandson little a. What's the genetic distance there? Okay, you guys did better than some of my previous webinars. Most people said 2, and that is correct. A few people did say 1. So let me explain that one. And I've had that one trips up at a lot of people. So in this case, we're comparing son B or grandson B and grandson little a. Remember, there was a mutation in each of them at different markers. So in this case here, we've got grandson A. You have to look here, and so one has 15, one has 14 at this marker. So there's one difference. And then when we go up here at this marker, now there's another difference here between the 9 and the 8. So there's 2 differences here between grandson little a and son B. And the last thing that I'll also show you, because this is also going to make a difference on your matches page, is if you're looking at only the first 12 markers, what is the difference between the genetic distance between grandson little a and son B? So if we're looking at only up to this point, the first 12 here, what's the genetic distance? Okay, most people got that correct. That's a genetic distance of 1 because we have just this one marker different here up to just the first 12 markers ends here after 389-2. So if these people were listed, matches, then if you're looking at the 12 marker match level, then you're going to see them listed as a genetic distance of 1 at 12 markers. But then when you go to the 25 marker match level, which is all of this, then that is going to be a genetic distance of 2 at 25 markers. So that's important to keep in mind when you're looking at your matches. I've seen some people who, are first learning this, also say, well, how come somebody is a genetic distance of, 3 to me at 37 markers, but they're only a genetic distance of 2 to me at 25 markers? Well, that means that there was an additional mutation in the 26 to 37 panel. So, it's cumulative. When you look at the higher marker levels, you have to add up all the mutations on all the markers up to that point. So hopefully this exercise helped you guys, understand this. And, if you're looking at results, manually looking at results between you and somebody else, such as on a project page, or if somebody sends you their results to look at, because you can't see that on the matches page. You can only see how many markers differ, not which ones, and not the values. Then, this will help you understand how to determine that. Okay. So let's talk time frame now. So the time frames for this. At the 12 marker level, this chart's a little bit busy, but look at the highlighted areas that I have here. At the 12 marker level, there's a 95% probability that people who are exact 12 marker matches, 12 out of 12 or zero genetic distance matches, will be related somewhere within the past 29 generations. Could be as close as father-son, so it could be within 1 generation, up to 29 generations in 95% of the cases. So that means that your common ancestor could be somewhere within the past, say, 700 to 900 years or so. In 5% of the cases, that's just a 95% probability. In 5% of the cases, they'll be further back than that 29 generations. So 12 marker matches, yes, it gives you a broad time frame, but broad isn't always better. So some people, again, who are not familiar with this, think, oh, well, I want more generations. Well, not when you go that far back, because that's going beyond your paper trail. So 12 is very broad, and basically it's like, great, I match them at 12, but are they really a recent match? That's when you need to go to the higher marker levels. So then let's say we go to the 25 marker level, and again, at an exact 25 out of 25 or 0 genetic distance, we now more than reduce that time frame by half to 13 generations. So now we're more like in the 300 to 400 year time frame. And so that's better for a lot of people, especially those of you who do have paper trails that do go that far back, or at least surnames that go that far back. But then there's still, people who either don't have a paper trail going back that far, or their surnames don't go back that far, and so those people could still potentially be, related further back, or you might not be able to connect with them that far back. The other thing with the 12 and the 25 marker levels is that you could actually have some matches that are really just coincidental matches at those lower marker levels. Basically, the fewer data points that you compare, the more chance that you have for, the possibility of just being coincidence. So for example, if you were only to look at one marker, DYS 393, and let's say you have a 12 and somebody else has a 12, does that mean you're genealogically related? You may or may not be. It's not enough information, right? So, that's where, you could match a quarter of the world who have a 12. So that's where you need to add on more information and essentially add on more data points or more markers. So then at the 37 marker level, we almost half the time frame again, and now we're down to 7 generations, which now we're talking about 200 years, give or take. Beyond 37 markers, we don't drastically improve the time frames anymore, we slightly improve. So at the 67 marker level, we can reduce that to 6, and then at the 111 marker level, which is not on my chart, we can reduce that to 5, or thereabouts. And again, that's in 95% of the cases. So you always have to keep in mind that there are going to be a small percentage, 5% is not 0, that there are going to be a small percentage of people, even at the higher marker levels, that are not related within these time frames and that are related further back. Now again, these are exact matches, okay? What happens when you have mismatches? What happens when you're a genetic distance of 1 or a genetic distance of 2? Well, every time there's, another genetic distance or another mismatch, you have to broaden the potential time frame again. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are related further back, just that you have to consider a wider range of years or a wider range of generations. So at the 67 marker level, you saw that my brother had a few one step or one genetic distance matches and 2 genetic distance matches. He had a ton of 2 genetic distance. And so now that time frame is 14 generations. So again, it doesn't mean that they have to be further back than 6 generations. They're not, they don't have to be between 7 and 14. It's just that now I have to consider the possibility that there's somewhere between 1 generation and 14 generations in 95% of the cases. So essentially from, based on these time frames, and actually Mary, that this is going to answer your question that you just asked, the optimal number of markers, so kind of the best minimum number to start with is 37, because at the 25 or 12 marker levels, those are going to be too broad. Mary had asked specifically for, if somebody's father was adopted or if you were adopted, what's an optimal number of markers that should be tested. I would at least do 37. You might want to do more than that, but don't start with any less than 37. Otherwise, it's going to be way too broad for you. And so actually, I talk about that on the next page here. So the bottom line with this is that the more markers you test and match on, the more confident you can be about the age of the relationship, the more precise we can be about the time frame where you should have a common ancestor with your match. And out of the 5 marker levels, that middle level, that 37 marker level, based on the number of generations on the previous chart, really 37 is the best minimum level for genealogical purposes. There are some projects, especially the projects that have testers with Western European ancestry, particularly British Isles ancestry, that will prefer 67 markers, because they have found in some populations where there was a very rapid expansion of the population base that there can even be some coincidental matches at 37. It's not as common as at the 12 and the 25, but there have been cases of that. So some project admins will prefer 67. You can always go to more markers after you've tested an initial set of markers. So if you're really not sure, you can always start with 37, and then if you see that you need to go to a higher level, you can upgrade to 67 or even to 111 later on if you'd like. If you prefer to just do it all at once, you can start with 111 if you haven't already tested. Most of you attending today probably have already done some testing. So there's always an upgrade price for upgrading. You don't basically repay for the whole test. So if you're going from 37 to 67, it's a $99 upgrade fee. You're not paying the full price for 67 markers. You're paying just for the additional markers that are being tested. So you're not retested for the lower level markers. You're only tested for the new markers that you're ordering. Okay, so let me finish up with these last 2 pages that should just be brief, and then we'll go ahead and close from here. So, and then I'll take final questions, of course. The Ancestral Origins page. This is a page that tends to confuse some people when they first look at it because it mentions percentages. And, you know, when you see percentages, most people immediately think, oh, this percent English and this percent German and this percent Irish. That's not what the percentages mean on this page. You have to keep in mind that when you're looking at Y-DNA, it's just your direct paternal line, your father's 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 father, etc. So we're not looking at percentages of your overall ancestry. We're just looking at where did your paternal line ultimately come from, right? So what this is going to do, and this will actually show you this for all of your marker levels. I happen to pull out a screenshot of the 37 for my brother. For his exact matches, it'll give me countries of origin that his matches reported, this is self-reported information, as their most distant known country of origin. When you first did your DNA test, you may recall signing a little green sheet that was the basically a permission form, and that green sheet is actually what gave Family Tree DNA permission to share your name and email address with your matches, based on your settings, of course, as well. But in addition to that, it also asked for your paternal and maternal line countries of origin. And so that's the initial information entered into the database. If you find that you had entered the wrong information initially, you can actually go back within your settings and change that in the system. That's also under My Account and part of that Most Distant Ancestor settings page. And so this is information that your matches reported. As far back as they were able to trace their genealogy, what country did they come from on the paternal line? So here you'll see that my brother matched somebody from England, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Russia. To genetic distance of 1, there were a few other countries here. I think we've got Hungary is here as well, and Ukraine, etc. And it's going to tell you how many total people you match at that level, and out of how many total people who tested who reported that country of origin at that marker level. So this is at the 37 marker level. So this country total here means that there are 21,809 people in the Family Tree DNA database who did at least the 37 marker test, could have been higher as well, but they tested at least 37 markers, and reported England as their country of origin. So if I was to actually go and look at my brother's 67 marker section for this, there are going to be less than 21,809 people listed for England in the 67 marker section, because not everybody who's done 37 has also gone to 67. You know, I have found that it's usually, I don't know the exact percentage, and it probably varies by region, but, you know, it's usually going to be a smaller number of people who tested at the higher marker levels. So that's something neat that you can take a look at on your own pages. So now to the percentage column. What does the percentage mean? All that is telling you how many people in the database, out of the total number of people in the database from that country of origin, you match. So basically, I match 1 out of 184 people who reported Latvia. So I match 0.5% of the people at 37 markers who reported Latvia. That is all that percentage means. So, you know, don't let this confuse you. And so it's not telling you that you're this percent this and this percent that and that percent that and that percent that. That's the wrong way to read this. And actually, if you click the page help button, the blue page help button at the top of the Ancestral Origins page, it will actually explain that to you. Then the last column here is the comments column. Comments are entered by Family Tree DNA staff. Sometimes the comments come from information from academic or scientific studies that were imported into the Family Tree DNA database. Some of the information in the Ancestral Origins database is anonymous, completely anonymous from these anonymous studies. Sometimes this information comes from actual customers of Family Tree DNA, but it is important to realize that this page is intended to be a summary page, and that's why you don't see names of your matches here. It's basically intended to be a roll-up or a summary of the information that your matches provided. So don't try to click on anything here to get your matches names. You won't get that. So the comments column was added by Family Tree DNA staff sometimes, and it's basically intended to provide additional information to kind of help clarify the country of origin, let's say. So for example, in my particular case, my background is Ashkenazi or Eastern European Jewish, and the vast majority of my brother's matches are also Ashkenazi as well, and so, even though here the country of origin is Lithuania, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were native Lithuanians ultimately. They were actually Ashkenazis, from Lithuania, which is different. I wouldn't necessarily match non-Jewish Lithuanians, but in this case I'm matching Ashkenazi Jewish Lithuanians. So other situations where you might see things like this is, let's say somebody has Basque ancestry. Basque might be listed there to kind of help clarify the country of origin. Or let's say, for example, let's say you're Native American and there happens to be somebody does know what tribe they came from from Native Americans, and so there might actually be a tribe listed there. Maybe an African tribe for people with African ancestry. So it's basically helping clarify the origin. So that's it for the Ancestor Origins page, and finally the last page I want to show you is Matches Maps. And Matches Maps here, again, I do have some names kind of blanked out just for privacy, but this is a great page. Besides just seeing your matches listed in a grid on the Matches page, you can come to the map and zoom in and out and see geographically which of your matches are most closely related to you, or excuse me, not related, most close to you, to your ancestry, from geographically. So you can go here, again, it's just a screenshot, so I can't do this interactive, but you can zoom in and out here. The different colors, the different colored pins here, there's a legend down at the bottom, and so this tells you, so these orange people are a couple of my brother's one-step matches, and the green here is some three-step matches, yellow two-step matches, etc. This is my brother's information here, and this is what my brother's matches will see when they actually see his name. You can click on any of these pushpin markers, and it will pop up a little box just like this that will show you the name of the match and their most distant ancestor if they filled that out, and the location where it is. And on the left-hand side here, by default, this name panel is closed, but if you go down here to the bottom, it'll say Show Match List. And so if you click on Show Match List, it'll open this, the name panel. And so if you're looking for somebody specific on the map, you can click on their name from this panel, and it will then come over here and pop up the box and point to the marker showing you where they are. So there's a lot of neat things you can do on here. By default, when you go to this page, it actually starts at the 12 marker level. So if you want to look at your highest level matches, you will need to come up to this menu at the top and go ahead and change that. And that's what I did to take the screenshot. I changed it to 67 markers. Now, if you have not already put in your own origin, you should do that. And you can do that from this page or from the My Account menu. From this page, you'd click on Update Ancestors Location, or mine is already there, so if you don't have it here yet, I don't know, the wording might be different. It might say Add Ancestors Location or something like that. And then you can click on that and you can start entering the information. And then it'll pop up here. So this is, a cool tool to be able to look at everything geographically instead of just looking at who's closest to you by genetic distance. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up, and I'll take our final Q&A. So number one, how to make the most of your Family Tree DNA experience. Number one, please be sure to share. And when I say share, I mean, please go ahead and upload your family tree or your GEDCOM. Don't be afraid to do that. You can hide the information on living people. You don't have to show your parents' names. You can hide that. You don't have to show your grandparents' names if they were born within the past 100 years or if they're still living. You can choose to hide that as well. So there are privacy options in the upload. And also your most distant known ancestor information. Be sure to go ahead and put that in there. So it's so much nicer to be able to see that on the matches page and to just see a whole bunch of blank information. And also I really should actually add there and go ahead and put in your ancestral coordinates and your country of origin as well. That's actually part of all of that. And there's different pieces that you can enter information for. Second, don't be afraid to contact your matches. Even if, you're not having good luck getting responses from people, still, keep trying because, you're going to hit somebody who's going to be really excited and respond right away. And just in general, don't be afraid to send an email out. Don't be embarrassed to send an email out or afraid that somebody's going to be like, what are you bothering me for? They shouldn't be doing that because they have tested for a reason. If they didn't want to be contacted, they could turn off their matching, and then they can't see you either. So, and everybody who tests with Family Tree DNA does so for genealogy or ancestry purposes. They're not testing for health reasons or anything else like that. So they should be interested in communicating, with other people regarding genealogy. And join projects. Certainly if you haven't already joined your surname project, be sure to do that. There are also geographical and heritage type projects. Heritage is actually grouped under geographical. And then there are haplogroup studies as well. And so once you have your haplogroup information, you can join a haplogroup project to learn more about the deep ancestry. And again, I'll cover that a little bit more in next week's presentation. Other places where you can learn more after this webinar and besides, additional webinars. The Family Tree DNA Learning Center, this is new. It's replacing the Family Tree DNA FAQ, the frequently asked questions. We're in the process of migrating from one to the other, so there'll be a ton of information there. The Family Tree DNA Discussion Forums is a great place to go to communicate with other customers, to communicate with other project administrators or just other knowledgeable people who are out there to ask your questions. If you're knowledgeable, you can go there and help answer questions. And then, of course, we have various social media pages. Two of them are Facebook and Twitter pages, but we're on a whole bunch of other social media pages as well. As far as talking with other people and really getting help personally, I think the forums are easier to do that than the Facebook page, but either way, whatever works better for you. So you can get help in both ways. And then, of course, I don't have it on here, but there's always customer service at Family Tree DNA. Customer service, the support is free. And so, you can, email or call customer service if you need to. All right, so finally, to wrap this up, there are 2 more webinars coming up this month. We have next Thursday. I'm actually moving this. Some of you may have already registered for next week's webinar. It was going to be on Tuesday, but I actually have to move it to Thursday. So I'm going to make that change as soon as this webinar is over. Will be the Family Tree DNA Results Explained, Y-DNA SNPs, the haplotree, and deep ancestry. So we'll get into more details about haplogroups and SNPs. And deep ancestry and what SNP testing is and all that good stuff. And then the last Thursday of the month, we have to put this out there, I'm going to do a webinar on Y-DNA success stories. So I actually want to ask you guys if anybody has a success story with the Y chromosome that you would like to see featured in the Success Stories webinar, please email me at webinars@genebygene.com. And that email address, when you get your follow-up email after the webinar late tonight or before tomorrow, you'll be able, that email address will be in there. So you can go ahead and contact me with that information. So I'm looking to the customers to send me. I have my own success story, but I need more than just one. So feel free to send that to me. And always, Family Tree DNA webinars will always be free to attend, and we'll have the April webinars announced by the end of March. All right, so final Q&A. Let me go through here. I will go back. There were a couple of really long questions here, which I may not be able to read through, but let me see what I can get through here. Okay. All right. Joe had asked earlier that his account showed that his 12 marker results were ready were due to be ready on April 11th, and is there any chance that it would get done earlier? It's possible. But never any guarantees. So we certainly the date that we put there, April 11th, is the date that I would look forward to. And if you do happen to get them earlier, then you'll just that'll be great. You'll have them earlier than expected, and we always like when we can do that. So but at least for the moment, April 11th is the goal that we're you should be aiming towards. Let's see. CS asks, why can the genetic distance say it's an exact match and yet the tip percentage is very low? CS, I'd have to see a specific example of that. It shouldn't be. If you have, well, it also actually depends what marker level you're looking at. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Yeah, I'd have to see the exact example for that to see what it is that you're talking about. You should have a really high percentage of at the higher marker levels, you should have a high percentage of being related within about those time frames that I showed you before. Like if you have an exact 37 marker match, the high percentage should be somewhere around the 7 or 8 generation mark. So. Oh, Barbara asked, she has the letters FF in the column with the icons after the YDNA 37. So that actually stands for Family Finder. That means the person has done the autosomal test. And you may also even see an mtDNA mutation, not mutation, an mtDNA notation in that column, and that just tells you the person's done an mtDNA test and what level they've done. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you match on that test or on that level. It's just telling you that they've done that test. To find out if you match on that test, you'd have to have done that test as well and then go to your, say, for example, Family Finder. You'd have to go to your Family Finder matches page and see if they show up as a match there. Okay. Mary asked, what if on a 37 marker test the matches are your surname, but 2 or 3 steps removed there are no 0 step or 0 genetic distance matches? That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. Certainly the 0 step matches are going to be, or 0 genetic distance are going to be your closest matches, but you very well may, as I showed with the example here, earlier, that you may have some people related within the past few generations that are 2 or 3, steps or genetic distance out and still have your same surname. And so, they happen to be, the exact time frame that they're related in, the exact common ancestor, that's still, you have to look at those percentages and look at that tip calculator to get an idea of, what the time frame might be, but then really look at your paper trail to figure out, how far back that is. But basically, and on a 37 marker, anything within 4 steps, especially with the same last name, should be a decent genealogical match. So. Sheila asked, if the surname is not known, what's the possibility of matching DNA with the mother, grandmother, etc.? Well, for this particular test, it's only direct paternal line. So we're not talking about any matching with any women on the Y-DNA test. Okay, Todd had a question. He has results for 37 markers, has matches at 12 and 25 markers only, but can see that others tested 67 and 111 markers. And if he upgrades to 111, will he have a chance of matching the others who have tested at the higher marker levels? I will say it's a possibility. And here's the reason why. I can't guarantee it. It's a possibility, but no guarantee. The reason why is each marker level has a different number of genetic distance that it will show as the max. So for a 12 marker level, you're shown exact matches or 1 genetic distance only for people who participate in the same projects as you. So if there's somebody in the database who's not participating in one of the projects as you and is actually a one genetic distance match from you, you will not see that person as a match. The 12 marker level is the only level that we do that at, that the project participation will determine whether a certain level is shown. At the 25 marker level and higher, it doesn't matter project or not project, it's the same. So the 25 marker level will show you up to a genetic distance of 2. At the 37 marker level, we'll show up to a genetic distance of 4. 67 show up to a genetic distance of 7. And at 111, up to a genetic distance of 10. So if you have people who match you at 12 or 25 markers, but not at 37, that means that they are more than a genetic distance of 5, or sorry, at least a genetic distance of 5 at the 37 marker level. So is it possible that those people could match you at 67 or 111? It is if they don't have many more mutations at those additional markers that are being tested. So for example, with a 67 marker test, since we go up to 7 genetic distance, if you already have a genetic distance of 5 with somebody at 37, they can only have 1 or 2 more mutations in the 38 to 67 part of the test. And if they have less, 2 or fewer more, they could show up as a match. But if they match, if they mismatch on 3 or more markers out of that additional 38 to 67 markers, they still won't be a match. And so same thing with the 111, going up to 10 genetic distance. So I hope that makes sense. So you could try. I have seen people who don't have a match at say 37, and then a distant match does show up at 67. But keep in mind it'll still be distant because all of those differences are cumulative across the number of markers you tested. So I hope that helps. Okay. John asked, is it unusual to have a common surname with a lot of people tested but have no matches even at 12? It can certainly happen. I mean, there are some people who actually have British Isles ancestry and assume that they'll have a ton of matches and then actually don't match anybody at 12 markers. And they just happen to have a rare DNA sequence that there aren't other people in the database who actually are from their paternal line for one reason or another. Either they just haven't tested yet, or maybe they come from a population that migrated, let's say into England relatively recently and only one person migrated in, who knows. It does happen. And then as far as, if you have a common surname, if you were like a Smith and then you have, other people, if you don't have other people from your Smith family who tested, you may not match other Smiths. So, certainly I would not, if you have a ton of matches at 12 markers, and regardless of what the surnames are, I would definitely recommend going to the higher marker levels. I would go to at least 37 and see who you match at that level, because even if you don't match your own surname, you very well may still have matches that you could then go ahead and figure out how you connect with those other people. So yeah, John asked was to kind of clarify something I said earlier. So if my Y-DNA does not match my own surname, but it matches other surnames, and if I can't find an adoption, etc., within, say, back to 1800, then it could be before the use of surnames. That's a possibility. That is a possibility. So, it's just something you have to just keep working on and keep, trying to work your way backwards. But definitely, again, in those situations, make sure you're at least the 37 marker level or higher, so that at least you're refining down to people who you should be genealogical connections with, and then see if you can find some connection between, your family and a family with those other surnames in a particular time frame. You look at census records, look at the neighbors. You just never know. Okay. CS was asking on the page where I was showing the STR marker results, there were a couple of markers that had a couple of asterisks. Those asterisks actually were to tell me that there were a couple of notations about those particular markers, and actually if you go to the page, the blue page help button at the top of the standard YSTR results page, it actually explains what those asterisks mean. And I, off the top of my head, I forget exactly what they were. I think one of them had to do with, basically a long time ago. One of them is, I think, known by another name. There's a marker that was known by two names, and so I think it mentions that one. And then another one, I think something changed with it. So, but yeah, if you click the page help, it'll tell you what those notes are. And in most cases, those notes probably are not going to be relevant to most people testing today. They're probably historical notes from a long time ago when some changeovers were first done. Okay, let's see. I got to scroll through all my answers here to find more questions. All right. See a few more. Alan asked if it's common for two mutations between two generations. I wouldn't say common, but definitely possible. So, like I said earlier, it's, I wouldn't call it common to have a mutation between father and son either, but it's possible and it happens, and it's certainly not out of the question. Probably happens more frequently than we realize that it does. But, is it the most common situation? No. And so the same thing with the two mutations between two generations. I wouldn't say that it's common, but it certainly can and does happen. Christy, I'm not sure I understand your question. Christy asked how many blanks in Y results are common, specifically in the 37 and 67 tests. I assume that a kit with those markers without results show up as a difference with matches, but is that a safe assumption? You shouldn't have any blanks on your markers. If there are blanks, then it may mean that for some reason the results are either in the process of being uploaded or there's an error in uploading your results somewhere. So if that's what you're talking about on the YSTR results page and you're seeing markers with no value at all, I would contact customer support about that and let them take a look at that. There shouldn't be anything blank. Okay, let's see. Michael asked, he sees in Ancestral Origins that somebody listed MDKO Mexico. MDKO means most distant known origin. So that, I don't know if that's somebody who actually has, I'd be curious what the country that's, if they're listed as like Native American, but then it says MDKO is Mexico, or another way around. So usually that might mean that they might have Native American ancestry or something like that, but that with a specific country, shown in there to say, well, this is as far back as they can trace. There's a couple of times when something like that is actually listed. Okay, let's see. Alan asked if there's a point in contacting people who are genetic distance of 3 or more. Well, first of all, it depends on what marker level you're talking about. Certainly at the 37 marker level, that's kind of close to the outskirts of what we show for matches at 37. But again, it depends. If they have the same last name as you, or there's something else about their geographic origin that you think is, close to yours, absolutely contact them. You don't have to contact only your exact matches or one genetic distance matches. But if you can see something in common with them, certainly contact them. If you can't, then that's up to you, how you want to pursue that. Okay. All right, so I think I answered most of the questions about the why DNA information. There were some questions that, asking about SNPs and about other things, but since this webinar was specifically about the why DNA markers and genealogical matching, I don't want to get into those other topics. So I apologize to those of you whose questions I was not able to answer, but certainly if you're interested in SNPs and in the SNP tests and haplogroups, I certainly encourage you to attend next week's webinar. Which will go into all those details, and then I can address that at the time. And so I do want to thank all of you for attending today. I certainly hope all of this information was helpful for all of you, and I certainly look forward to seeing you all at a future Family Tree DNA webinar, either next week or afterwards. So look for that follow-up email to come out to you within the next 24 hours that will have a link to the recording of today's presentation. It'll have a link to our main webinars page where you can see the archives of our previous webinars and etc. The last question that I'll answer is I do have a question whether there are any coupons for discounts on tests right now. Right now, to my knowledge, there are not. There are sales periodically throughout the year. I can't tell you exactly when the next sale will be, but you can either hang on until you see the next sale announced, or go ahead and look to upgrade now. It's up to you. So, all right. Well, thank you again, everybody, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. And I will see some of you at next week's webinar. Take care. Bye bye.